movement, say along what we call the supply curve. Supply curve. So movement along the supply curve. So what we call changes in what we call the quantity supplied. So movement along the supply curve. So what we call changes in quantity supplied. So what we call the changes in what we call in quantity supplied. So number one, at the back of our mind, I say that when you talk about movement along the supply curve, so changes in quantity supplied, it is basically caused by changes in price. Caused by, at the back of the mind, is caused by changes, what we call the changes in what we call in prices. That implies that other factors we understand are held. Other factors are held constant. So that is basically to imply that other factors are definitely held constant. Other factors we say are held constant. So I want us to draw the diagram, so then we synthesize the information and make the information at home. And make this information definitely at home. So this is what we have. So this is supply. So we have this. So this is Q1, call it P1. Then we have P2. And then we can see Q2 here. So we have P2, and we can see that. So I can have an arrow that is moving this, then I have this arrow that is moving that, an arrow that is moving. So we can have X and Y. So we have this arrow moving, then we can have this arrow moving backward here. Then we also have this, we have arrow moving this, then we have this together too. So I'm saying at the back of your mind, you need to understand that when you talk about movement along the supply curve, it is basically caused by changes in price, and then other factors are held constant. So I want to start by basically saying that at low price, and we give it P1, we understand that the quantity supplied, we say is low, and you say at Q1. So at low price P1, we can see that the quantity supplied is definitely low at Q1. Are you able to see that? Quantity supplied is low at Q1. So just say an increase in price, we understand that an increase in price, say an increase in price, that is from P1 to P2. So an increase in price from P1 to P2. What happens when you increase price from P1 to P2? What happens, Charles? What happened? So when you increase the price from P1 to P2, so we say comma, it leads to what we call to the increase. So we say to the increase in what you call in quantity demanded, to the increase in quantity demanded. It leads to the increase in quantity demanded, say from what you call from Q1 to Q2. So this definitely leads to the increase in quantity demanded from Q1 to Q2. Q2 leads to the increase in quantity demanded from Q1 to Q2. So this causes a movement along the supply curve. Say this causes what we call a movement. We call it along what we call along the supply curve. Along the supply curve. This causes what we call a movement along the supply curve. We say from X to Y. From X and say to Y. So that causes a movement along the supply curve from X to Y. Are you able to see that, Charles and Peter? From X to Y. Charles and Kitari, are you able to see that? You just give me yes. So just say on the other hand, you just say on the other hand, you say on the other hand, high price P2, on the other hand, high price P2, on the other hand, high price P2 leads to quantity supplied, leads to what we call high quantity supplied, leads to what we call the high quantity supplied Q2. High quantity supplied Q2 leads to what we call high quantity supplied Q2. Are we together? Q2. As price, we say as price, we say it decreases. As the price decreases, and we understand that from P2 to P1, as price decreases from P2 to P1. Somebody saying something? Charles? Is it Charles? Charity. Is the board not clear? Charity, is the board not clear? Charles says that the board is not clear. Charity, do you experience the same thing? Charity, kindly respond. Charity, do you experience? It's blurry. Let me just a minute. Now respond. That is it now okay? Perfect. So I think I knew what was happening. I think I knew what was happening. So then we basically understand that when price now it decreases from P2 to P1, when price decreases from P2 to P1, we say it leads to what we call a decrease. It leads to what we call a decrease in quantity. It definitely leads to a decrease in quantity. We say we just have a decrease in quantity. We say supplied, a decrease in quantity supplied. We say from Q2 and say to Q1. It leads to a decrease in quantity supplied from Q2 to Q1. Are you able to see that? It leads to a decrease in quantity supplied from Q2 to Q1. From Q2 to Q1, 1. Are we together? This causes movement along the supply curve. This causes, we understand that this, we say causes what we call a movement. It causes what we call a movement, say along what we call along the supply curve. It causes a movement along the supply curve, say from a movement along the supply curve from Y and say to X. So now there's a movement along the supply curve from Y to X, from Y to X. It causes a movement along the supply curve from Y to X. It causes a movement along the supply curve from Y to X. Causes a movement along the supply curve from Y to X. So as an NP, what I was saying at the beginning, we're saying that movement along supply curve is brought by changes in price, ceteris paribus. Is brought about, movement along supply curve is brought about by changes in price, other factors L constant, or we say ceteris in economics, ceteris paribus. Together, that's the NP. So that is the NP. So I can just shift an arrow and say, caused by changes in price, other factors L constant, ceteris paribus. To memalism. Is that at all? Is the explanation at home and understood? Is the explanation at home and understood? Is the explanation at home and understood? Perfect. So then we go to movement along the supply curve. Shift in supply curves to changes in supply. Shift in supply which we also call changes. We call it changes in supply. Shift in supplies to what we call changes in supply. So what do you call this? Shift in supply. So what do you call changes in supply? Shift in supply. So S1. So under this case now, price remains constant. If you look at changes in supply, now definitely we have what we call supply remaining constant. We have supply remaining constant, supply remaining constant. This one basically is caused by other factors other than price. So if you look at this, I put climate. I put climate upper. This is QO, this is Q1, Q2, this is Q1 together. So it is brought about by other factors, brought about by other factors, brought about as an NB. We need to understand brought about by what we call by other factors. We call it other factors affecting what we call affecting the supply, affecting what we call the supply, other factors affecting the supply, and we say the prices, we say remains what we call constant, and the price definitely remains constant. So this is brought by changes in other factors, and you're saying that price remains basically constant altogether. So if you look at this diagram, I'm looking at other factors affecting supply. And one of the factors that affects supply basically have climate, other factors affecting supply, and so it can shift to the left, and it can shift to the right. So we discussed the shifting to the right and shifting to the left. Shifting to the right and shifting to the left. So based on that diagram, we have the climate. So just basically say if the climate becomes favorable, if the climate becomes favorable, if the climate basically becomes favorable, if the climate is good, if the climate becomes favorable, quantity supplied, quantity, supplied, increases, we say from QO to Q2. If the climate basically becomes favorable, we understand that the quantity supplied will increase from QO to Q2. Quantity supplied will increase from QO to Q2. So this causes a shift. This causes what we call a shift. A shift, we say to the right. This causes a shift to the right. This causes a shift to the right. To the right. To the right. The shift to the right is also called downward shifting. To later downward shifting of supply curve. A shift to the right is also called downward shifting of supply curve. Together charts. So if an examiner tells you downward shifting of what you call supply curve, downward shifting of what you call the supply curve, what you call the downward shifting of the supply curve, what you call the downward shifting of what you call the supply curve. If an examiner tells you downward shifting, it's the same as rightward shifting in supply curve. Are we together? So we understand that from this one to say from SO to S2 together. From SO to S2. So then we talk about factors causing rightward shift of what you call of supply curve. Factors causing what you call the rightward shift of supply curve, which is the same as downward shift of supply curve. So what we talked about favorable. We talked about favorable climate. So we have number 2, favorable climate. We can talk about reduced incidence of what we call of strike, reduced incidence of strike. We have issues to do with the reduced incidence of strike. We have what we call reduced incidence of strike. We have reduced incidence of strike. We also have another factor which is called better technology. When you have better technology that will lead to increase or shift to the right. We have what we call reduction in the cost of production. We have reduction in what's called the cost of what we call production, reduction in the cost of production, reduction in the cost of production. Then we have what we call favorable government policies. Favorable government policy. We have 5 what's called favorable call it government policies. Better road and communication network. So we have what's called better, call it better road and what we call it communication network. Better road and what we call communication network. What we call the better road and what we call communication network. So then we can proceed on the other hand. We were using climate. They say on the other hand. So on the other hand, if climate is unfavorable, if the climate, we're just using climate becomes what we call unfavorable. On the other hand, if the climate basically becomes unfavorable, if the climate we say becomes unfavorable, quantity supplied, we understand that quantity supplied, we understand that decreases. Quantity supplied, we say decreases. Quantity supplied decreases. We say from SO and say to S1. Quantity supply decreases from SO to S1. From SO to S1. From SO to S1. So SO to S1. So this is what's called shifting to the left. Shifting to the left. So that is what we call upward shifting of what we call of supply curve. Upward shifting of what we call the supply curve. That is what you definitely call upward shifting of supply curve together. So then we causes of leftward. Causes of what we call of leftward shifting of supply curve. Causes of what we call leftward shifting of what we call supply curve. So what will cause the leftward shifting of supply curve? What makes you have unfavorable? Call it unfavorable climate. Based on the example, unfavorable climate. So we can have increased incidence of strike. We just proceed. Increased incidence of strike. Increased incidence of strike. We have what's called poor technology. poor technology. Increased cost of production, we have what we call increased cost of what we call of production. Increased cost of production, what we call the increased cost of production, increased cost of production. Then we have unfavorable government policies. We have what we call unfavorable government policies. And at the end of the day, it's what we call poor road and communication network. When you have poor roads and what we call communication network. Poor road and what we call the communication network. What we call the poor road and what we call the communication network. Together, team. Poor road and communication. Those are what cause the left shift in the supply gap. 2 yes. So understand at the back of your mind that when you talk about shift, it is caused by other factors other than price. Are we together? It is caused by other factors other than the price of the product. So I want us to proceed to what we call interrelated supply. I want us to get to the interrelated, what we call interrelated supply. We have it as the interrelated interrelated supply. We have it as the interrelated supply. We have it as what's called interrelated supply. Interrelated supply. So we have what's called interrelated supply. So on the interrelated supply, we have number one what's called the joint supply. We have number one what's called the joint. We call it the joint supply. Interrelated, we have number one what's called the joint supply. So when you talk about joint supply, we say some goods are basically produced together. Some goods, we understand that some goods, we say some goods are produced together. Some goods are basically produced together. Some goods we say are produced together. Some goods are basically produced together. Some goods we say are produced together. So we say the total supplies for such goods, the total supply, the total, we call it supply for such goods, are called what they call a joint supply. So the total supply for such goods, we basically call it a joint supply. If some goods are produced together, so the total supply for such goods, we call them joint supply. Example, we can talk about example. Example is what's called the crude. We have what's called the crude oil. An example is the crude oil. And the crude oil is basically different oil that are produced, different oils that are produced. We have what's called different oils. We have what's called different oils together. That is what we call a crude oil. That is what we call a crude oil. Those are different oils that are there together. Then we have what we call a composite supply. The next we have what we call a composite. Call it a composite supply. We have what we call a composite supply. The next we have what we call a composite supply. So whenever we talk about composite supply, this is supplies of substitute of each other. Are we together? Supply of goods that are substitute of each other. So that is what we call composite supply. Supply of goods, we call it supply of goods, or what we call goods that are substitute, that are, we say are substitute, we say of each other. So supply of goods that are substitute of each other, we call it composite supply. supply of goods that are substitute of each other, we call it a composite supply. Together, that are substitute of each other, supply of goods that are substitute of each other. So say the total supply is called what you call a composite. It's basically called a composite supply. It's definitely called a composite supply. It's called a composite supply. So when we talk about competitive supply, what you call the competitive, call it the competitive supply. We have the last one as what you call the competitive supply. The last one we call it the competitive supply. So whenever we talk about competitive supply, whenever we talk about what we call the competitive supply, so we call it refers to different uses to which a factor of production can be put into. So we call it the different uses to which a factor of production, we call it the different uses, we say to which we say a factor of what we call production, we say can be put into. So the different uses to which a factor of production. And whenever we talk about factors of production, we have labor, we have capital, we have entrepreneurship, and we have land. So when you say the different uses to which a factor of production can be put into, that is what's called a competitive supply. So then I proceed to what we call exceptions to the law of supply. We proceed to what we call exceptions. We have what we call exceptions to what we call to the law of what we call supply. Law of supply is to what we call regressive. We call it the regressive supply. Exceptions to the law of supply is to what we call the regressive supply. Exceptions to the law of supply is to what we call regressive supply. Exceptions to the law of supply is to what we call regressive supply. So whenever we say exceptions, we say exceptions to the law of supply. Exceptions to the law of supply. So when you say exceptions to the law of supply, we say this goes against what's called the law of supply. When we say exception, we understand that it goes, you say against what's called the law of supply. So exception basically we say it goes against what's called the law of supply. Exceptions we basically say it goes against the law of supply. So quantity supplied, when now we basically say the quantity supplied is high when the price you say is low, and you say vice versa. So this is now the opposite. So when you say exceptions to the law of supply, we're now basically looking at supply, and you're saying this one goes against the law of supply. If you're very keen, as we were looking at the law of supply, we basically understood the supply is normally high when the price is high. Is that true? Supply is normally high when the price is high, and supply is low when the price is low. So when you say exception, it is basically contrary to the law of supply. And when you say contrary to the law of supply, we are basically saying that quantity supplied is high when the price is low, and vice versa. Together, we respond with yes. So I want us to talk about circumstances that basically explain exceptions of the law of supply. So we talk about those circumstances. We talk about what we call circumstances. Circumstances. So circumstances, exceptions to the law of supply. We say exceptions. Call it exceptions. Exceptions to what we call to the law of what we call supply. Applies to the following circumstances. Apply. Call it applies to what we call to the following. To the following circumstances. Apply to the following circumstances. So exceptions to the law of supply basically applies to the following circumstances. The first circumstance, which is very common in an examination, we call it the backward bending of supply curve. The first exception, we call it the backward bending. Call it backward bending of what we call the supply curve. This is very common with a material, and you're given 5 to 7 marks. Backward bending of supply curve. Backward bending of supply curve of labor, of what we call labor. But we also call it trade-off between work and leisure. We can also call it trade-off between work and what we call leisure. Trade-off between work and leisure, or what we call regressive, or what we call the regressive supply, or what we call the regressive supply. So backward bending of supply curve. So what we call trade-off between work and leisure, or what we call the regressive supply, or what we call the regressive supply. Allow us just to put it here. We have it here. Allow us to be here. Allow us to put it there. Allow us to put it there. And you want to see what we are basically discussing. If you look at this, so these are what they call wages. And wages are denoted wages by W. Wages by W, not biggest story kid off. So this is wage 1. So you give H hours for work. I proceed again to this level. I call it H2. So now the wage is this. When you increase the hours, the wage we see is increasing. Then I have this. I call it H3 hours. Then the wage is increasing. And it's very realistic. That one is based on the law of supply. Are you able to see that? Based on the law of supply. Based on what you call on the laws of supply. Based on what you call the law of supply. Based on what you call the law of supply. Based on what you call the law of supply. So if you look at this, this is what you saw. When you increase the wage, people are willing to work more, and it's obeying the law of supply. Are you seeing it's obeying the law of supply? So wage 1, wage 2, it's obeying. As you increase, hours of work are being basically increased. Hours of work, we can see, are basically being increased. Are we seeing that? Hours of work, we can see, is basically being increased. Are we able to see that, Killian, Charity, and Charles? Are we able to see that? Are we able to see that? If you're able to see that, then we respond with a yes. We can see hours of work are basically being big. But look at now the contradiction, The contradiction basically comes at this point. Look at what is happening, It's very funny. I have wage 4, but at wage 4, we can see something very funny. That we have given a higher wage, but look at hours of work. Does it make sense? Your boss tells you today that if you work for 18 hours, if you work for 18 hours, I am going to triple your salary. Are you going to work for 18 hours, Charles? Suppose you're working somewhere and your boss tells you that I'm going to triple your payment. If you're earning 100,000, then I'm going to give you 300,000 untaxed. Are you willing to work for those 16 to 18 hours a day? Will you be willing to work for 16 hours a day? No. Why no, Charles? It basically means that you don't obey the law of supply. You see, we're saying in the law of supply, more money, increase in price, and the more we supply. Logically, Charity, would you work for 16 hours every day? You are earning 115. Your boss tells you, I'm going to give you $500,000 if you're willing to work for 16 hours every day. I'm going to give you $500,000. I'm going to do an $500,000. Charity and Gillian, what would be your response to your boss? What would basically be your response to your boss? You will be fatigued. Naturally, we have very good students together. But naturally, we see in terms of work, people are willing to offer much hours of work when money is there. Is that true? It just means that you people are realistic altogether. But majority of people today, for example, we say that if you can do 18 classes, if you can basically do, let's say, for example, we put it teaching, that if you can work for, if you can do, let's say, even 8 classes a day and more money, it means more classes, more money. You'll find people doing it. Are we together? You'll find people doing it. That is a majority of people. But we have realistic people. For example, you in the class, you're very realistic together. But some people would be willing to do those 16 hours together. Together. We respond with yes. So this is what we call trade-off between backward bending of supply curve of labor, or trade-off between work and leisure, or what's called regressive supply. So, Charles, a bigger percentage of people in the world will always work and work until they don't know what to do. But they'll keep on working and working, and they'll never give up as long as there's money. Because they obey what? They obey the law of supply. So we can see at wage 1, these are the hours that are being offered. If you increase the wage, we are also increasing the number of hours being worked. But if we go for wage 3, again, we're still increasing the hours of work being offered for work. Now the contradiction comes at wage 4. And this basically goes against, we call it against what we call the law of what we call supply. This one definitely goes against what we call the law of supply. Wage 4 goes against what we call the law of supply. Wage 4, we can see, goes against sorry. So we can see that if you look at this, you can see now wage 4, we expect this person to work even extra, but this person is not working extra. What explains that? The question is that why would that happen? Because naturally people would work for more hours. Have you asked yourself, Charity, why would somebody do that? More money on the table, but they're not willing to work more. Why would a person do that? Gillian, are you asking yourself those questions that I'm also asking myself? So, why would people do this? Why would people do this altogether? So some people, when they get money to a certain level, they'll decide what? Let's say, for example, they've made, 1 million. They've made an M. These people decide to go to Mombasa and relax. They'll say, no. I have 1 million, so I'm not willing to work extra more. So the first reason is what's called they'll trade work with leisure. Trade work feel rich enough to work with what you call leisure. So they'll feel rich enough and decide, I want to go to, let's say if in Kenya, I want to go to Mombasa and enjoy the beach altogether. They will feel rich enough and substitute work for leisure. They'll pick the people that they cherish and go to, and they decide to go to Mombasa and enjoy the time in Mombasa. Are we together? So the second reason that explains what you're saying here, certain people work with target. We say that certain people, we understand that work with what you call with targets together. So the essence of them basically getting employed is to probably make, for example, they decide that I am going to be employed for X number of years. And in those X numbers of years, once I've made certain amount, let's say, for example, 15 to 20 million, I am not going to be employed again. I am not going to be employed again. Do you get that? I am not going to be employed. 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 So some people work with target. So once I've made X amount of money, whether you're willing to add more weight to them, they're not going to work. Are we together? They're not going to work anymore. They will decide we are not working anymore. They will decide now to trade. They now decide to open their business and do their own thing. Are we together? The third reason that explains that, the higher the income. The higher the income, we say that the higher the taxes, the higher the taxes it attracts. So you basically understand that with higher income, it attracts what you call more taxes. So the higher the income, the higher the taxes that it basically attracts. So with more income, it attracts more taxes. Now the higher the income, the higher the taxes that it basically attracts. With more income, we attract what you call more taxes. With higher income, we basically understand that we attract more income, more taxes. So some people, when they get to a certain level, let's say, for example, we know that about 24,000 in Kenya, you should be taxed. So some people, when their income is getting to 24, and you tell them that, well, no, they will say no, because they understand that the more taxes they're going to attract. Tuko pamoja. We respond to this. Kama tuko pamoja, tubonyeze yes. Is the explanation at all? Is the explanation at all? Is the explanation at all? Tubonyeza yes, kama the explanation is definitely at all. Is the explanation at all? Is the explanation at all? Is the explanation at all? Nimeshukuru. So we put that explanation down. So we put the explanation down. We say at low wage W1, at low wage, we say W1, at low wage W1, at low wage W1. The number of hours offered for work, we say that the number of hours offered, we say for work, the number of hours offered for work. At low wage W1, the number of hours offered for work is low at H1. Is low at H1. Is low at H1. Is definitely low at H1. So when we say an increase in wage, call it an increase in wage. We'll call it from W1 to W2, an increase in wage from wage 1 to W2 wage 2, an increase in wage from wage 1 to wage 2. We say that leads to increase in number of hours offered for work, leads to an increase, leads to basically an increase in what called in the number the number of hours offered, we say for work, offered for work. For work, we say from H1 to H2, numbers of hours offered for work, from H1 to H2, from H1 to H2, H1 to H2, H1 to H2, number of hours offered for work, from H1 to H2, from H1 to H2, from H1 to H2, and we can see that. Can we see that? We can see that. Then a further increase in wage, we can see a further increase in wage to wage 3. We say leads to what we call increase, leads to what's called increase, leads to increase in numbers, in the numbers of hours, in the numbers of hours. We say offered, we say for work, leads to increase in the number of hours offered for work, Two leads to offered for work to H3, which are higher. We understand that these are higher. So now exception comes in this statement. So we are introducing what we call a contrast. A contrast. We say, however, we say an increase of wage, and say beyond wage 3. So however, an increase of wages, I'll have an increase in wage beyond wage 3. That is from W3 to W4, we say leads to. From W3 to W4, from W3 to wage 4, leads to fewer hours, leads to fewer hours offered for work. We say for work leads to fewer hours offered for work, leads to what we call fewer hours offered for work, leads to fewer hours offered for work, and that is H4. So look at where H4 is. Can we see those in the diagram? Can we see those in the diagram? Can you see that in the diagram? Reasons behind it. So we talk about reasons behind this. So what are the reasons behind this? I was explaining them bit by bit. Some people feel rich enough. The workers now feel rich enough to substitute work for leisure. The workers will say feel rich enough to substitute. We say to substitute what's called work and say for leisure. Feel rich enough to basically substitute work for leisure. So they definitely feel rich enough to substitute what we call work for leisure. Which they say the people who work with the target. The certain people, there are certain people who work with targets, work with what you call targets. So the certain people who definitely work with what you call a target. The certain people who work with the target. So the moment they achieve their target, we basically say that the moment they achieve their targets, the moment, let's understand that the moment they achieve, say the moment they achieve what you call their targets, the moment they achieve the 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 targets, they no longer encourage work. They are no longer, we say, encouraged. They're no longer encouraged to work. They are no longer encouraged to work. Start their business. Start, you say, their own business. Their own businesses. Start their own businesses. They start to call their own business. They start their own business. They start their own business. They start what you call their own business. They start what you call their own businesses together. So the third reason, we understand that the higher the wage, we have it, the higher the wage, the higher the wage. We say the higher, we say the income tax, the higher the income tax it attracts. The higher the income tax, it definitely attracts. The higher the income tax, it attracts. The higher the income tax, it attracts. So higher taxation discourages workers from offering. Higher taxation discourages what's called workers from offering. Say from offering what's called higher hours for work. Higher hours for work. So with higher taxation, it definitely discourages workers from offering what's called higher hours for work. So this question that I've talked about, that diagram, and explaining this in an exam, you can earn 75 marks, 5 to 7 marks. And if you look at the very present question, this question is there. This question is there. I want to begin pushing assignments to you. Tuko sawa. So that is trade-off between worker and leisure, or the backward bending of supply curve, or regressive supply. And that question particularly can become, and it gives you about 5 to 7 marks. 5 to 7 marks. To get a 5 to 7 marks. Bonyeza yes kama tuko pamoja. Bonyeza yes kama tuko pamoja. Then the second exception to the law of supply curve, we call it supply of perishable goods. Or what you call perishable goods. The others are in the laws. Supply of perishable goods. If you know goods are going to go bad, Charles, are you still going to insist on charging them higher price? Are you still going to insist on charging them higher price? If you know for sure that these goods are going to go bad. Yes. So when you have goods that are likely to go bad very fast, you can supply them for lower price, which is against the law of supply. The law of supply, meaning we should supply at higher price. When you have perishable goods, you can supply them at a lower price to avoid them going very bad. So that is the second exception. So we have the next expectation. We call it expectation of what you call of a fall in price. Expectation of what you call of a fall in price. Expectation of what you call a fall in price. Expectation of a fall in price. So if we expect that in the future, the prices are likely to fall, are likely, if it was 100, we expect if it was 100 shillings, if it's 100 shillings, we expect the price to fall to 20. What will happen? we are willing to offload our, let's say, for example, shares are products altogether. You know that in the next coming, you know that in the next 4 months to come, shares are likely to do what? Are likely to fall. A share that was selling 100 is likely to fall to 20 shillings. What will happen? What is likely to happen to you who was invested in shares? You're likely even to sell those shares at 60 bob. Are we together? If the shares, you're likely to sell because you know that in the future, I'm likely to get nothing together. Expectation of a fall in price altogether. So you're willing to supply them even at a much lower price. At a much lower price. Charity and Gillian tuko pamoja. They say where supply of money is basically controlled by the government. Or we say where the supply, we call it where the supply of money, we say supply of money is being controlled by the government. It's being, say, controlled by what's called by the government. Where the supply of money is definitely being controlled by the government. Where the supply of money, we understand, is being controlled by the government. Then you say if it is a government policy to reduce the price of commodity. If it's a government, if it is the government, we say the government policy to reduce, we say to reduce what we call, if it is a government policy to basically reduce the price of what we call of a commodity. If it is a government policy to reduce what we call the price of what we call commodity, if it is the policy of the government to reduce the price of a commodity, then you can talk about natural calamities. What we call the natural calamities, we have it as natural calamities. Calamities such as drought. Have you ever noticed something about drought? When there's drought, there's no products, but it's very expensive together. There's no products, but it's very expensive. Natural calamities such as drought, leading to low supply at low price. You know that leading to what we call low supply. We say at what we call at high price. It leads to low supply at high price. If you're very keen, during drought, calamities such as drought, you find the supply is very low, but the prices are quite very high. Together Kitale, together Charity, together Gillian. If we are at home, then we respond with a yes. If we are at home, we respond with a yes. So I want us to talk about the next thing, that is elasticity. Elasticity of supply. What we call elasticity of the supply. The next is what we call elasticity of what we call supply. So whenever we talk about elasticity of supply, it basically refers to what we call responsiveness of quantity supply. It refers to what we call responsiveness of what we call of quantity supplied, responsiveness of quantity supplied to what we call to the determinants, of what we call the supply. Responsiveness of what we call quantity supply to the determinants of supply. We only have one determinant of supply in this case. We have what we call one determinant, and that determinant is what we call price. In this case, we have one, and that determinant we call it price. Tafadhali tubonyeze yes kama tuko pamoja. And that one determinant, we call it price. So allow us to start on that determinant of price, on what we call that determinant of price, So we call it the price. We call it the price elasticity. We call it the price elasticity of what we call supply. Price elasticity of supply. Sawa Charity, the price elasticity of supply. Au tuko na nguvu tuendelee? Tuko sawa watu wangu? Watu wangu tuko sawa? Tunaelewa? Tunaelewana? Asante nimeshukuru. And I hope we have the energy to continue. So the determinant of supply, one of it is what we call price. That determinant of price of supply, one of it is what we call supply. We call it the supply. We call it the supply. One of the determinants, we call it the supply. One of the determinants, we call it supply. We call it price. So that gives us what we call price elasticity of supply. And we basically denote it in economics. We basically denote it by what we call ES. In economics, we basically denote it with what we call ES. So how do I define what we call price elasticity of supply? It's what we call responsiveness of quantity supplied to changes in supply. We call it responsiveness of what we call of quantity supplied. We say to changes. We call it to changes in supply. Responsiveness to quantity supplied to changes in supply. Responsiveness of quantity supplied to changes in price, because it's to changes in price. So the question is, how do I get now elasticity of supply? How do I arrive at elasticity of supply? How do I get elasticity of supply? The first way is percentage change in quantity supply, percentage change in what's called in quantity supplied over what we call percentage change in what's called in price. So this is formula 1. So I have formula 2, where we say change in quantity supplied over change over original quantity over QS original. So you divide by change in price over the original price. To cooperative. So if I introduce multiplication on this, that is on formula 2, I'll just say change in quantity supplied over change over original S times P over change in. So what is the formula? The formula now comes change in quantity supplied to differentiate it from demand over change in price times P over QS. Remember these are original. We call them originals, to what we call initial values. Those call them originals, to what we call initial values. Those are original, to what we call initial values. Those are original, to what we call initial values. Tafadhali tutumia this. Originals, to what we call initial values. Original, to what we call initial values. Originals, to what we call initial values. So we come here. 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 And we give illustration. We have our first illustration. We give it as a first illustration. We have our first illustration of that. So I get to that illustration. We say that the quantity supplied of a commodity is 50 units. Quantity supplied of what we call of a commodity. Quantity supplied of a commodity is what we call is 50 units. Quantity supplied of a commodity, we say, is 50 units. When prevailing price is shillings 10. When what we call the prevailing price, we say, is shillings 10. Well, the prevailing price is basically shillings 10. Well, the prevailing price is shillings 10. However, the price increases, we say, however, the price, we say the price we say increases. However, the price increases. However, the price increases to shillings 15, to shillings 15. However, the price increases to shillings 15, to shillings 5. However, when the price, we say when the price increases to shillings 15. However, when the price increases to shillings 15. However, when the price increases to shillings 15. However, when the price increases to shillings 15, quantity supplied increases. Quantity supplied, we say increases. Quantity supplied increases to 60 units. Tuko sawa kwa hiyo swali? Tuko sawa kwa hiyo swali? Tuko sawa kwa hiyo swali? Tuko sawa? Tunaona swali vizuri? So I want to now begin working on that question. Can I start working on that question, Charity? Can I start working on that question, Gillian? Nimeshukuru. Charles is doing well in terms of informing mwalimu anaelewa. So I can have the first formula, ES. But before you do this question, let's create a column. We have, on that column, we have what's called initial. And then we have what we call final on that column. We have initial, then we have what we call final. So then I have the price, which is initial. I have Q, which is the final. I have initial price. We have 10, and the final is basically 15. I have initial, which is 10, and then I have the final, which is 15. So at that point, I know that at 10, we had 50 units. At 10, we had 50 units. And at 15, we had 60 units. At 15, we had what was 60 units. So we had 10 units. 10, we have 50 units. At price 15, we have 60 units. So the first formula, I basically understand the percentage change in quantity over percentage change in price. Percentage change in price. So how do we get percentage change in quantity? Percentage change in quantity, I will have the final quantity, which is 60 minus 50, to go half over initial, which is 50, times 100%. So times 100%. What do we have for that? So what do we have for that? What do we have for that? What do we have for that? So what do you have for that? What is the percentage change in quantity? What is the percentage change in quantity? So somebody gets it 20. Someone gets it 20, so we have 10 over 50 times 100, so that should be 20%. 20%. So I want us to get percentage change in price. I want us to get the percentage change in price. So the final price is 15 minus 10, which is initial, over 10 times 100. So what is the percentage change in price? What is the percentage change in price? What is the percentage change in price? What is the percentage change in what you call price? So what is the percentage change in price? So give me the percentage change in price. So that is 50. The percentage change in price is 50%. So we come back, and then I have a figure of 20, I have a figure of 50. So what is elasticity of supply? We'll come back there. What is elasticity of supply? Team, good people, what is elasticity in supply? Give me the elasticity in supply. So give me the elasticity. That should be 0.4. So 0.4 is the elasticity of supply. But because it's less than 1, so this should be equivalent to what's called inelastic. This should be what's called inelastic. That should definitely be what's called inelastic. That should be inelastic. We use our second formula, we call it formula 2. We use our second formula, we call it formula 2. The second formula, we call it formula 2. On that second formula, I basically have change in Q over change in P times P over Q, and understand that these are original values. Understand that these are original values. So what is change in Q? So change in Q will definitely be final. We have it as final Q minus initial Q. So what is the final Q? The final Q is 60 minus initial Q, which is 50. I have 10. I have it as 10. I have it as 10. So we have the final Q minus initial Q. I have it as 10. I have it as 10. Minus initial Q, I have it as 10. So then the second, we have what's called change in P. We have it as change in P. So the change in P is definitely will be 15 minus 10. Will be 15 minus 10. Will be 15, change in P, that is 5. Tuko sawa. So change, this is, that is change. Tunaelewana hapo? Charity and Charles. Charity and Charles. Tunaelewana Charity and Charles. Charity and Charles. Are we at home? Perfect, if we are at home. So we come back here to our formula. We come back to our formula. The formula was saying change in Q over change in P times P over Q. So we have it now. Change in Q, we have it as a figure of change in Q that was 10 over 5 times initial. What is the initial P? The initial P is 10. So that is 10 over initial Q, which is 15. So this one goes here 2. So that should be 20 over 15. So what is the elasticity of supply? What is the elasticity of supply? In that case, what is the elasticity of supply? So give me the elasticity of supply. So we have the same. So we have the same thing, which proves that our formula is on point. The two formulas are on point because we're getting the same. And it is inelastic since it is less than, call it less than 1. It is inelastic since it is definitely less than 1. It is inelastic since it is less than 1. Since it is less than 1. Tuko sawa. Inelastic since it is less than 1. Less than 1. Together. Assignment 2 for you. For you so that I can see how you're doing it. Then I give you 3 minutes. So I say the price of a commodity. Price of a commodity. This is example 2. The price of a commodity. Price of what we call of a commodity. So the price of a commodity. That is example 2. The price of a commodity. The price of what we call a commodity. The price of a commodity. The price of a commodity increases from shillings 10. Call it increases. Increases from what we call from shillings 10 to shillings 20. The price of commodity increases from shillings 10 to shillings 20. So we say this leads to increase in quantity supplied. We say this leads to increase in what called in quantity supplied. And say from 60 units from 60 units to what I call to 80 units. So this definitely leads to what we call increase in coal supply from 60 units to 80 units. The same required. So we have what we call required. So we have what we call required. So the first required, we have what we call price elasticity of what we call of supply. Price elasticity of supply. And number two, we call it interpret your results. We call it interpret your results. So do that for me in 3 minutes. In 3 minutes, we should be done. So that in 3 minutes, you should be done and I explain. So in 3 minutes, you should be done. In 3 minutes, I know it should be done. Should be done in 3 minutes. Is 3 minutes enough? Is 3 minutes enough for you to do for me that? Charles, dakika tatu si sawa? Charity, Kitawe? Is 3 minutes enough, Kitawe? Is 3 minutes enough? Perfect. So in 3 minutes, I need you to do for me that. So have you done that? If you are done with that, someone gets 0.03. Charles, get that, Kitawe? Do you have that, Kitawe? So that Mwalimu confirms what you have done. Kitawe, do you have the same thing? Kitawe, do you have the same thing? So let me confirm. So just use a single formula that is change in Q over change in P times P over Q. So these are our original values. Original values. These are original values. So I have initial, then I have final here. Initial, then I have final. So I have P increases from 10 to 20. The method Q increases from 60 to 80. So I've changed in Q, that is 80, minus 60, that should be 20. Change in P, that should be 20, minus 10, that should be 10. That should be 10, that should be 10. So I come here, change in Q. So change in Q is 20, over change in P is 10 times original values. Original P is 10, original Q is 60. So what do you get? This cancels, this cancels. This cancels, that should be 2 over 6, that should be a third. A third is 0.333. So that should be the answer. So I have an amazing team. Watu wanashikanisha haraka haraka. So I think I'll create the first 30 minutes or an extra 30 minutes to do examples from the past paper. So this is inelastic. Inelastic. So this is what you call inelastic. So that is inelastic. So inelastic. So we can talk about the interpretation. So I put it there, interpretation of price, of elasticity of supply, of elasticity, of what you call elasticity, of what you call supply. Interpretation of what you call elasticity of supply, interpretation of elasticity of supply. So when you say 0 less than elasticity, we have it as 0 less than elasticity of supply. Elasticity of supply less than 1, less than 1. This is inelastic. So types of price, elasticity of supply. Again, this could also be types of what we call price, elasticity of what we call of supply. Types of price, elasticity of supply. Then we have elasticity of supply greater than 1. This should be elastic. This should be elastic. Then we have number 3. Number 3, we have elasticity of supply equals to 1. Equals to 1. So we call it unitary elastic. So when elasticity or unit elastic, then we have elasticity, number 4. Elasticity of supply is equals to 0. Supply is perfectly inelastic. Supply, we say, is perfectly inelastic. Call it perfectly inelastic. Then we have 5. Elasticity of supply. Elasticity of supply. Elasticity of supply equals to max error. You cannot define the boundaries. So in that case, we say supply is perfectly elastic. Supply is perfectly, call it elastic. This is perfectly elastic. Tuko pamoja? So that is perfectly elastic. That is how we interpret. So from our tomorrow's class, we start on factors. We call it factors influencing. We call it the factors influencing price elasticity of supply. Price elasticity. Factors influencing what we call price elasticity of what we call of supply. Factors that say influencing what we call price elasticity of supply. Factors that we say influencing what we call price elasticity of supply. Factors that influence what we call price elasticity of supply. Factors influencing price elasticity of supply. Together. That is where we start tomorrow. Because I did not give you a break, you can have that break now. And then with me, I'm not meeting you, but I'm meeting other guys at 4. So God bless you. Unless somebody has something that is burning, that has to be something that has to be sorted now, I beg to close it here. Thank you so much. Asante.